Hello YouTube and welcome to GrunfWorks. This is a special episode of Kerbal Engineering where today we will be building a Laythe base SSTO, and it will be a very speed build using the OPT spaceplane parts, humpback to be exact, and it will be doing so because this plane or spaceplane or SSTO, call it whatever you want, took me an unholy amount of time to build due to some specific mod bug, which I'll be talking all about a little bit later on, but the author has been awesome as ever and has helped me find a suitable replacement workaround. And as you can see, we are placing our Karibou modular rover that we have built in the previous episode of the Kerbal Engineering, which I hope you have seen. If not, I will be posting the link in the episode in the description, and also on the card that you will be able to see, and also on the end screen. However, the mission for this SSTO is to get this rover all the way up to Laythe, land there, deploy the rover, so deploy the base, and then return back, and hopefully all is well and good. And since I really wanted to deploy using the SSTO, I wanted to do something cool, because I didn't have that many special episodes since we hit like 5,000 subscriber and whatnot, so I figured might as well, cram in a little bit, Kerbal Engineering. And I saw that some people are still looking how to build, a mobile base or a base. I have shown how to build a base, like a small Pioneer one. This is how to build a mobile base with deployment rover, together with the previous episode. So, and there will be some future content that will be like deploying like a bigger base, like we did using the MKS Duna class components, but that's still in the works. And given the complexity of these mods, it takes me an unholy amount of time. So let's just say what you're seeing here, brace, it will be a long episode, roughly 1 hour and 23 minutes at the 4 times acceleration. So all in all, it took me around an average engineering episodes take me like, I don't know, maybe 2-3 hours to create, and then show you guys the interesting bits and failures. But this one took me more like 40 hours. So here you can see the rover. And beside the rover, we have to account for a very long trip to Joule for a roughly crew of 4 Kerbals. So I wanted to put some, life support components, but also some cryogenic, because I want to be freezing for the most part, most of the crew of the shuttle. There will be probably one pilot who will be awake during the whole trip, but the rest of the crew will be, in suspended animation or popsicles. So yes, that's kind of my reasoning. And right now I was just fixing out the content of this cargo bay for the humpback class SSTO. And making sure that we have liquid fuel and oxidizer. Well, we don't need the oxidizer, because for the powering this craft I plan to use liquid fuel with some, jet engines, air-breathing ones, because Laythe is air-breathable, together with some carborundrum drives. Yes, I know I'm running a lot on carborundrum, but I mean, these engines are awesome, so yes. Okay, so I want to be placing here. I was first thinking of putting some OPT J60 scramjets. That didn't work out too well here, so I was trying to find another. And I remember that I had a while back, I had another scramjet that I was using. Then I was trying to find if this would work. Hell no. Then I was trying to put a 2.5 meter here with like carborundrum drives, but then it was narrowing down my passage, so I was thinking if I put something like that. My delta V isn't really stellar. I don't know. Then I figured, hold on, let's put rather the other types of drives, and another part, well, carborundum drives will still be on, but I wanted to see if I could use a different type of container. And if I put these three, I would have 12,000 delta V. And I remember that we had a different type of container, which was a little bit, yeah. So then I realized, okay, you know what? I'm gonna use the I think it's Star Waster engine, and those will give me an unholy amounts of delta V, and it's also scramjet, so it gives a very decent thrust to weight given this ship size. Then I wanted to use a bunch of OPT ramjets. Sorry for a little bit tilting there, I know everything is 4 times time accelerated, so yeah, I do apologize for that. But all in all, I mean, Kerbal engineering episodes are all about creating planes, or space planes, or modules, and showing you my whole thought process of what I was doing, what was I adding, what was I removing, and all, well, not all, but some of my failures as well, through which I learned. So, for this craft I wanted to use the procedural wing, Space Plane Plus, and actually this is the mod that I had the problems with. Because I'm playing with version 1.1.3, and for some reason, in my 80 mods that I'm using, this OPT spaceplane parts, or not OPT, but the procedural wing for some reason was clashing with the Kerbal joint reinforcement, and it couldn't, for the life of it, get the proper collider mesh to form. So I contacted, the crazy random who is maintaining the mod and trying to help me out here. And despite some debugging, we have figured out that, the issue should have been fixed in the 1.2, but for some reason there were some collisions and we weren't exactly sure how to fix it. But then he suggested that I use a different type of wing, which is the B9 procedural wing, and then in the end it worked. But I figured I didn't want to cut this part out because I was still doing, design choices and stuff, so I thought it would be interesting. I've been putting liquid fuel engines here, and I was wanting to put, 2 of the reactors here that would be powering my SSTO with electric power. And then I figured, dual, carborundum drives, that should give us enough delta V, carborundum wise. So here is, it has, I'm clearly over engineering this craft. But then again, if you think about it, that's something that I wanted to do for a long time, and I am no expert for the SSTOs. That's more like guys like Matt Lown or Marcus Thrim or stuff. I hold my, own on my, in terms of SSTO design, but I'm using a lot of mods, and some of the mods I know how to use, some of the mods I'm learning how to use as I'm playing with them. So don't consider me a mod authority when it comes to designing ships of that craft. I'm learning here as some of you are as well. So, okay, putting here the radiator panels, and I am hoping that those will work well. Putting on the other side as well. I have no idea if the taking off excess heat will be enough. I don't think so, but I'm willing to give it a go and see where we'll end up with. Okay, this looks plausible. How much do we have? Okay, we have 95,000 delta V, assuming that we put the dual carborundum drives. And let me just see if I can balance these out, because as you can see, my center of lift is way ahead of my center of mass, and that's even without me adding the front hand spoilers that I plan to put, or winglets. Now I'm just trying to align these two engines from the OPT. And the OPT being Orbital Portal Technologies, just for the people who might not be familiar with it. I mean, I like this mod because it helps me create a beautiful craft. And for all of those that are actually, now basically telling me that I should use stock, I'll tell you one thing. The day they replace current wings with procedural wings in stock, I will consider a fully stock playthrough. Because I don't like tiling wings. It's not my thing. And that's why I figured, I like tailoring wings to the craft itself. I mean, let's face it, in the real world you would also be shaping the wing towards the craft. You're not just, slapping in something that you could use. Okay, so here we have a big ass tail fin. And I think it gives it a sort of, shuttle-y look and feel. Then adding up the rear control surfaces. And as you can see at this point, it's looking pretty well for me. I have my center of mass, center of lift well aligned here, which is something that I'm particularly proud of, given the design of the shuttle and everything. But there will be lots of back and forth trimmings in terms of this, so we are by no means done. So, okay. Looks good so far, so let's put some landing gear. And given the fact that only the landing gear that is here is good enough, so I'm gonna be putting them on the side fuselages. 2 pairs, just like split a little bit, like this. And then probably another pair at the beginning. And then one in the middle. This should hopefully result in my craft having stable enough and enough wheels, because I know wheels are a little bit of a problem in the 113, and yeah, well, that's something I have to live with. So, as you can see, this is my craft. There are many like it, but this one is mine. So, let's run a quick simulation. As you can see, looking good, thrust weight at 0.66, and that's pretty decent given the SSTO setup. And then we come to the first of the problems. Whoa! My wings rip off and all that jazz goes to waste. Now, my initial thought is I need more struts, of course. Because then, the wings are pretty big, so my first and initial thought is, Kerbal, add more struts. So I'm just putting the invisible ones. I think those are S&M strut invisible, so I'm strutting everything that I can. Okay, and here I made one mistake. As you can see, single symmetry, all of it. And then I put the dual symmetry, but yeah. Needless to say, I run a couple of tests and I think, it seems that I've re-engineered this craft by a little. There were more than several attempts which ended up exactly the same, so I was fiddling a little bit back and forth, and as you can see, it pretty much finishes the same. I did try with a different spaceplane part wing, but it didn't succeed very well. All of my parts were executing the same amount of failures. So as you can see, I've put in a different type of P-wing, and it didn't work. So I decided, screw P-wing. I'm gonna try the OPT winglet style. And it took me a while to find the OPT because I was suspecting that the problem was with the P-wings. So yeah, that was kind of my main gripe with them. So I wanted to do something using the OPT wing, but I simply couldn't find for the life of me good enough surfaces to be able to replace the wings, because I wanted to to have a huge craft with a big wings. So I was trying to actually do, you know, the X-wing style. Something like this. And then I've put obviously the engines on top and on bottom, which you will be able to see shortly. Once again trying to balance out center of lift, center of mass and all that jazz. It took a few attempts, but in the end I was able to get them lined up properly, more or less, as you can see, with minor amount of fiddlage. And then I was shifting fuel a little bit also back and forth just to make sure that my center of lift and center of mass are aligned. I was trying even to get this wing somewhere in the middle, like this winglets, if you can see, because I was curious how well it would look and fly. I mean, let's face it, why not? So I once again restrutted everything, this time with correct double symmetry. And let's see how that went. Obviously I need to realign my landing gear. I wanted also to, you know, aerodynamic forces. And as you can see, it takes an unholy amount of time to actually get the craft to lift off, but we had a successful liftoff. So definitely a step in the right direction. And the craft does control, although I must say the amount of control surfaces makes it actually quite hard, and it's very slow and cumbersome. I have no idea what these flameouts are, by the way, but thrust to weight certainly looks good because it's 2.84. So it actually flies stable, but it flies less like an airplane and more like a dart. And needless to say, that gave me some concerns in terms of how well it will fly on Laythe as well. But you have to admit, it looks pretty cool. I mean, right now my main issue is to make sure that this can fly. Second thing will be like maneuverability and all that jazz. Now at this altitude, Star Waster engines start to take over, so I had to slow down even a little bit and then punch them just to basically... The goal here with the carborundrum fuel is to eject us as quickly and as, you know, high as possible in atmosphere while we are still using the jet engines, and then when they start to, you know, lose the power and the thrust, then we will be switching over to carborundrum drives, and when they will hopefully take over. So that's kind of my main reasoning, and I cannot really complain. The craft flies pretty stable. The thrust to weight is decent, although with the speed going past 1100 meters per second it starts to drop sharply, and at this point you have to engage the carborundrum drives to give it some extra kick and keep, you know, thrust to weight around 1. And it worked well to a degree, but I wanted to close my intakes because I didn't put them on action groups. I only put one of the 2 intakes per action group. So that was definitely something to think about. And I also activated some of the initially I forgot to turn on the reactors, then I turned on the reactors and I turned on the radiators. And as you can see, so far so good, no complaints. Our delta V is in the 50s range, and it will only climb the higher up we get. Looks beautiful. Screenshot for posterity. So it feels like with a craft like this we could be getting into the into orbit. And then I forgot to turn off the liquid fuel engine, so I was a little bit fiddling to figure out which ones are which. And then my core started to overheat and my engine started to shut down. Now, if you think about like that, that means that, well, we do have an issue with the cooling. However, at this point we might just be making up to the orbital speeds, as you can tell. But in the end, we would be running out of power, and then I started the reactor, at least, just for the short time being, to give us that extra battery power, which resulted in core overheating and reactor shut down in rather ceremonious fashion, or unceremonious fashion. Nevertheless, I love the flexibility of this craft, that it was able to continue on a single reactor and almost get us up into the orbit. So I figured, start the reactor and see if we can, get something done. But our electric charge ran out mere seconds from glory. Time for some fixing. So, clearly, these winglets weren't enough to control, so I found out finally, after some fiddling with trying to find the correct wings, and I was even, desperate enough to try tiling OPT wings, which, let's be honest, it doesn't look really good. And then I realized there is an actual component, after some fiddlage, which is actually the proper one. I was trying a lot of things. If you consider, flames like this setup, it definitely takes a while. By the way, given the amount of quick shifting back and forth in time acceleration, I should probably have an epilepsy warning or something. A lot of rapid movements and stuff, so I'll probably put it in the description of the video. So I was trying something like that, despite the fact that I think it's butt ugly. And yeah, then looking through these components, I also found these guys. And in the end, these are the ones that I've been looking for. So put these and then these two. So if you put those, then those two match together, so I could actually be, playing with those rather. Then again, I needed to come back and fix all the, wing surfaces. That would give me some much needed wing surface to have better lift and make the craft, a little bit more, let's say, flyable, more behaving like a plane rather than the dart. But once again, I wanted to, fix the engines, how they work, how they look. And then I had to fiddle once again with the tanks, because my plane was looking more like a UFO rather than a plane. This is not necessarily a bad thing per se, but like I said, it does take an unholy amount of fiddlage. Moving everything back and forth. And still, it has very few control surfaces, so that's also something to think about. Then I figured I might want to extend the craft by one component. One humpback hollow fuselage, perhaps. So, make the craft a little bit longer, because it's not long enough, right? That could give a little chubby guy a little bit, more sleek structure. So I figured like that, and then we just put in here a little bit of extra of RCS fuel, which we need, a little bit extra of life support, which we will need, a little bit extra of waste life support, which we will also need for our recycling efforts. And that makes my plane a little bit bigger, meaning I have to once again realign all that stuff. Strutting, yes, and then I figured, there are radiator panel edge ones, so I thought, like, just for the testing purposes I might as well be adding the edge ones, despite them being not my style. I was trying to see with the expandable ones, which I could expand, but once I get higher into orbit, because let's face it, that at the point where I'm using carborundum drives, I'm already high up. So then I thought, okay, no, let's fix these. We'll put, reactors at ahead, because those might be heavier, which turns out they weren't. So I've rather opted for having liquid fuel tanks, the huge ass ones, at the beginning, and then be attaching everything at the back. So in the end, like, let's see how do these fare. If you want to see the final product, I will be posting the link at which you should be looking at, timestamps, but this is, like I said, showing the design process is half of this, the soul of the series, and that's why I wanted you guys to see it. So here if we put the wings, well, almost. That's something that I can fiddle with, the fuel and let's put a little bit of RTGs at the beginning, a couple more batteries, because who doesn't like batteries? Still my center of thrust is ahead of center of mass. I have to realign my wheels, obviously. I still have to figure out a way how to put, and I figured I'd use two of the smaller wheels at the back. I know that they will be in the air, but the point of them is when I'm taking off that I'm not hitting anything important. So I'm trying to find the all moving winglet at the beginning. Putting the next Karibou, that's correct. Looks like we are strapped up. We still have to fix the center of mass, center of lift, and I'm using the fuel distribution. I'm strutting everything just to make sure that nothing gets broken in the process. Okay, and I just wanted to put action groups for everything, make sure I fix those. Reactors, radiators, and all that jazz. This is a part of the engineering, the tries and fails and whatnot. So you can see, like, me putting action groups on everything, engines, intakes. So, after some amount of fiddlage, I have also, you will notice that I have attached a metric crap ton of radiators at the back because of cooling, and I've decided to put a single carborundum container tanks, which I thought would be enough. Then be putting some air brakes, just to make sure that we can actually, take off, land, and all that jazz. Because given the craft this size, you have to have the capability to decelerate in a good way. Then I figured some RCS thrusters I wanted to put, and these were the only ones that had significant thrust, so yeah. I'm using here RCS build aid just to make sure that my craft is balanced RCS wise. So far so good in all directions, great. And then the custom group 10 would be for the air brakes. Okay, let's test this bad boy. 0.77 at the takeoff, which is very decent for an SSTO. As you can see, acceleration is not the problem. However, taking off is even more, because this guy has way less control surfaces than the old one. So I'm pitching up as hard as I can, even using the RCS to actually propel me a little bit up. But as you can see, I'm almost strafing the deck, so to say. I managed to pull up, and eventually, as you can see, this will be going rather well. But, I mean, given the amount or lack of the amount of the flight controls, it is actually quite difficult to control. So it behaves, despite the larger wing surface area, it even behaves worse, or has worse, so to say, performance in terms of turning and everything that. I mean, it's stable, but yeah. And the higher up we get, and the faster we go, the more of our scramjets start to take, effect. And as you can see, it can accelerate incredibly quickly. It basically, at this angle, it will just shoot us out in the upper layers of the atmosphere, which it's not a bad deal at all. We have to just be careful that we don't burn up in the process as well. And I was thinking around angle of 20 degrees would be kind of the sweet spot here, but at already this altitudes my engine started to lose thrust. So, I mean, I'm riding along on the speed wave, and our apoapsis is at 33. So, decent, but clearly some room for improvement. Okay, time to kick the carborundrum drives, and we have shut off all the air intakes, hopefully, and running off the carborundrum drives, and now hopefully the reactors are starting up. As you can see, they are recharging, and I'm hoping that the radiator panels will be sufficient to keep everything cool. Once again, screenshot, because the craft looks cool, I'll give it that. So we are accelerating with 0.74 just on the carborundrum drives. And here I'm monitoring my time to apoapsis. It is around 40, which is kind of a sweet spot, and I'm using my pitch to actually keep it around that mark. It is decreasing because our thrust to weight and our apoapsis and all that jazz, but at some point it should start picking up again and increasing. I believe this SSTO was the first one that would be able, or it seems like that it's capable of going to orbit. Our time to apoapsis is holding now. It's no longer dropping, and it starts to pick up and increase, meaning we will be going to space with this one. Woohoo! 49,000, and I'm using once again my pitch to regulate my time to apoapsis, which is kind of handy. and it's a good proof of concept for the design. Now, as you can see, our apoapsis is picking up and our periapsis is increasing as well. So, I mean, our relative vertical speed is 134 and climbing, which is good. So all in all, we are burning for the apoapsis, and as you can see, our apoapsis will for sure be going over to space. Yep. We are already have apoapsis that's out of the atmosphere. I'm shooting for 100 by 100. So it's 100 by -10, and when we get to the periapsis, or sorry, apoapsis, we will be doing the circularization burn, which in this point it should be 98 meters per second, which is with our given 49,000 meters per second negligible. Alright, pitching down for the circularization burn, which is due to come in 3 minutes. Let's speed up things because, I mean, yeah. This whole video is accelerated between 4 and 5 times acceleration, because given the amount of components and everything, I was doing a little bit bad at frame rate, but as you can see, this is pretty decent stuff, and yeah, as you can see, like I promised, this one is going to the orbit. So it is orbit capable. I think we want to do the first tests. So let's take a Kerbal. Any Kerbal. I think, I don't know who have we taken, but I don't know if it was Val or somebody else. Let's try the popsicle part, shall we? Grab and board. Great. So I think, Valentina, you will be, test popsicle to see that we have enough. And let's transfer another more. Great. So, no, actually it's Luzor and Bill that will be, moving. And as many as I could, actually, to be honest. Now, one Kerbal frozen, second frozen. Yeah, Valentina will be piloting, sorry. So, okay, I would say this is a rather successful test. Now, the next test of this craft, the task that it needs to perform, is the re-entry at Laythe. So I was running a little bit of, I ran a simulation at Laythe with the re-entry apoapsis of 60 and periapsis around 20, which is typical for Kerbin. And then I wanted to save you the whole alignment process and all that jazz, and just to show you the re-entry. Sorry for a little bit darker build, but we are going into the, I think it's Jewel Rise. And as you can see, the craft itself is more or less stable, with all of the air brakes deployed and all that jazz. We are bleeding off enough speed, which is definitely a good thing, but nowhere nearly as fast as I would like it to, and that brings us to the issue where we're descending a little bit too steep. So our vertical speed is going, it's dropping below 50 meters per second, and I would like to keep it between 50 and, or not more than minus 100. So far I was able to control that using just a pitch, but at some point, things started to explode. And that was mainly because I pressed accidentally, it was my fault. I started using accidentally start reactor without turning on the radiators, which caused some, well, you guess. But I wanted to see how it works and ride this along. We have sunrise above Laythe. I wanted to see if this craft is really robust enough so that we can actually, perform the re-entry regardless. Needless to say, it was a little bit harder to control. I mean, all in all, it was stable enough. The only problem with my experience with it was a little bit lack of, pitch, yaw and roll authority. And at some point it overheated and just blew up smack right into my face. I think the cockpit. And I figured for the entertainment value you might want to see some explosions. The interesting part is that, I was no longer able to control the vessel. However, it was still going strong until various components of it started blowing up. The good part is that those components that are coming are still stable on the re-entry. The fact that they're in 1,000 pieces, nobody gives a damn. Okay, going at 3 Mach towards the surface of Laythe. Yeah, guys, I'm assuming that you have a notion on how is this going to end. And hopefully not being me, happily landing that one on the surface of Laythe and everything is hunky-dory. But more like, something along these lines. The only thing left out of the plane were the air brakes. So I figured I needed some more rework to be done. And to put a little bit of, batteries, and I figured I might as well be putting a nuclear reactor here rather than the two outside, given that those were breaking. And if I put a nuclear reactor here, I would just put a shitload of the radiators to make sure that it's being cooled enough. But I want to make sure also that they're not protruding from the fuselage itself. So I was putting them in mirror symmetry rather than the actual. So I put I think 7 or 8. I think 7. And just make sure that when I start the reactor, that I toggle all the panels. And I've also replaced the near future ones with the, I believe, rover dudes ones. That meant also I wanted to realign the rest of the components. But that's also created, I believe, a hump, which you can see a structural hump in my fuselage as well. So yeah, I had some issues with that, but in the end I fixed it, and yeah, as you can see, now it got fixed. So it's once again fiddling with fuel left and right, obviously. I was even experimenting to have some, container tanks at the beginning. that actually made the craft more stable, which is a great thing. And then I figured I might as well, be putting another carborundum fuel tank here. But then I saw that it actually has a pretty high mass, so I figured I could rather use that for balancing. And then I decided to put balloons as well. And the balloons, you have seen me and they're trying to test it. The point of them is basically decelerating fast enough into the upper layers of the atmosphere. Then I've decided to put some 3.75 meter SAS just for, funsies, and basically retry the re-entry. Just to see and try to get a feeling how will this fly. So, attempt number 2. We've already tested that, this can get to orbit, so no point on me testing this one again. But I wanted to make sure that I deploy the balloons and that I can test with the balloons how it will actually perform. That was the major kicker for me to actually get this one in place. You will probably not see it on this video, but I was actually struggling quite a lot with the SAS, because the SAS authority, the pitch authority on the humpback cockpit is good, but other two, like roll and yaw, are downright terrible. So I decided to add some more SAS units. $289 meters per second to burn. This time I've decided to show you as well a little bit of alignments and all that jazz, because I thought, maneuvering of the plane itself was also one part of the problem, the lack of the SAS authority. I mean, you don't see it that much because the plane seems to be turning fine, but please consider that this is around 4 to 5 times acceleration. So okay, and that's the final sort of I usually put this maneuver node just to show me at the point of when we're starting to hit the atmosphere, where is my nose supposed to be looking at. So I know, so I can orient the craft. And here you can see me struggling a little bit. But so far, no harm, no foul. Then we have accelerated this to a degree. I'm making sure to align the plane that it looks correct. As we want to be maintaining high angle of attack on the re-entry to keep the vertical speed arrested, hopefully. Generate enough lift so that our profile can keep us above and bouncing on top of the atmosphere. And I was aiming for that island that you can see below, but now given the fact how much energy we need to bleed off, I wasn't sure if it was really a good idea. Then I've deployed the chutes and then realized that I've put them in the wrong orientation, but nevertheless they picked up and they have forced us to face things nose on. I think this is a cool screenshot. I know that I shouldn't be using two, but come on, guys. Given the amount of a project that I'm trying to run here, I thought, I mean, let's just say for the time purposes that they could be put one up behind each other or beside or something like that. We are bleeding off energy and bleeding off speed at a pretty satisfiable rate. However, we will be overshooting this island, which means that we will need to turn around and go back. And this is where another problem that I've encountered with this SSTO: maneuverability. So I decided to put on my air breathers, slightly set them, you know, to puff a little bit, and then I should be cutting the cord on these balloons. Right, and all I need to do is now to basically pull up from dive and basically turn around and land. As it turns up, when you're high in the atmosphere with modest or next to none amount of flight surfaces, you want to have engines that will give you a little bit of thrust vectoring to help a little bit when it comes to turning. So I decided to kick again the carborundrum drives, because these guys are actually have a very good thrust away or thrust vectoring range, if you remember my carborundrum collector. And despite the fact that we are decelerating, what I'm trying to do is arrest my vertical speed and pull up, because this land is coming awfully close. And basically 750 meters above Laythe sea level we were able to pull off. Now comes the tricky component: making a 180-degree turn and go back. So I decided to, you know, kill a little bit of speed and then start, you know, making my turn, which I'm sure you will imagine, with this level of craft that barely took off, it's not an easy feat of engineering. Given the craft size, I would almost want to implement a rudder on it. I know that the tails have sort of a rudder, but you know, I was thinking more in terms of, you know, ship rudder. And then we started slow but painful 180-degree turn. Okay, once again we are diving down and full power to engines. Come on. Nose up, nose up. Whew. This time I believe it was some 100 meters above sea level. I'm guessing that my next turn is not gonna be so popular. I'm basically showing you this a little bit more than I should. Maybe I'll cut some components of this in the future, but the point is to show you how painful it is, or it was, to control this craft. It, like I said, it flies like a dart rather than a plane. I'm able to have some success with turning, although as you can see we are only halfway around the turn. And then I realized I forgot to turn on my reactor. Oops. Let's try now with the air breathing. We have enough energy, so might as well. Let's open up the doors and then we will be starting up the reactor. starting up the reactor, making sure that our craft gets refilled, and once again I've turned 180, closed everything, and it seems we are starting to go in the right direction. Slowly but surely. I wanted to see how much time it would take to just turn 180 degrees. And I don't recall if I was able to land here or not. I guess we will both see, or we will all see together. I think so. I followed this one all the way down. But as you can see, it was not easy turning, so I was like using both the rudder and the pitch. And at these speeds, you know, pulling sudden maneuver changes, it's not really advisable and good thing to do. And then my nose started to dive again, so I had to turn off all of my engines once again just to regain control. So as you can see, it's stable but uncontrollable, which is the problem. And that's due to the lack of control surfaces, I'm guessing. Decelerated a little bit because I didn't want to go too fast. So I once again stopped the carborundrum engines, also killed a little bit of the throttle on the air breathing ones, and just having air brakes do their own magic in terms of, you know, what they should be doing in the first place. Introducing a whole lot of drag. And as we steer towards the land, we once again are very careful not to have our nose dive too sharply below, because that might spell out to be a problem. The problem is that the craft is stable at higher speeds, but what happens at subsonic speeds? Well, I guess it's to be found out sooner rather than later. I mean, thank you all for following the video. I know it's a little bit lengthy one, but I'm trying to, you know, keep it informative so that you can see what has been going through my mind, how I've been playing, what was my reasoning, and how am I testing to make sure that some, at least, of my components work. And as you can see, we are once again nose diving, head down towards the altitude of terrain, so I'm trying very, very hard to pull up. Even using the carborundrum drives, but at this point I'm pretty sure you'll come up with a conclusion that I did. Explosions! Well, the tail survived. You know what they say, any landing that you can walk away from. However, nobody was able to walk away from this one. Okay, so that being said, this is the finally moment where I actually, you know, got the feedback from the Crazy Random, and thank you a huge amount, man, for helping me out here. You're awesome, like the whole KSP community is awesome as well. And I started designing using the B9 procedural wings, which, I mean, it wasn't my first choice, but looking in the hindsight, probably it should have been. It's great, it's modular, it works well, and you can define many more parameters than you could with the original P-wing, so my doubts about it were completely unfounded. So, modifying a hell of a lot of parameters, and once again this will be nightmare for balancing when in terms of yes, Center of lift and center of mass, sorry. Trying to adjust the shape a little bit. I will be putting the control surfaces at the back, so I don't need these guys. I can enlarge a little bit. Then we come to the wingtips. I want to be matching like that. Then we'll be pulling I actually like the idea of them being not 100% straight, but let's say under like 45 degrees or something. I think it looks cool. Besides, one of the requirements I have for my space planes, they have to be cool. If they don't look cool, I'm not motivated to design them, so that's the thing. Control surfaces, increasing the size on that one a bit. A bit more. And here you can see me fiddling with various procedural B9 parameters. And then we're angling this one to 45 degrees as well. And given that it's not 90 degrees, I'm going to give it both pitch, roll and yaw authority, but with the limited degrees of freedom. So. Follow the wing shape, please. Yes. I guess one could argue that those two winglets could be colliding, and that's a fair point, but I thought all in all, let's keep it as is. Then I want to be putting another two, and those are all moving wings, which help me actually create a lot more lift at the forward section, which is much needed because we want to be able to pull, you know, the heavy nose up a little bit. Strut everything, and I think we are up for a final series of tests. Given now that this is a completely different setup, we have to test once again launch from Kerbal to orbit. Okay, and hit it. It still looks cool. I just love the design. Let's try and pull up. And up we go. I was thinking that it had problems lifting up, but I think it was simply due to my wheels not pivoting around the center or just behind the center of mass. They were a little bit further back. So that's the reason why the craft had some problems in terms of lifting off. But as you can see, it flies like a dream. The controls are easy. It feels very responsive. And it looks beautiful. Once it actually successfully passes the control or the tests, getting to orbit and landing, it will be assigned a name and put into production. So, assuming everything goes well. Okay, Star Waster engines kicking in. And hopefully taking it from 700 meters per second or Mach 2 all the way to Mach 3-ish. You'll notice that I'm maintaining around 22 to 25 degrees pitch, which I'm hoping will be the sweet spot for this one. leveling off at 20,000 meters to get a little bit more speed at 20 degrees pitch. And as we start to waste speed, we immediately introduce the carburetor engines. Now we are bleeding off some speed still, but I figured I might as well reopen things, and I forgot to put the, nuclear reactor on the start. So I'm kicking it now. I mean, all the radiators are on, and come on. Crap. And my nuclear reactor shuts off. So a tiny amount of fixes, strutting everything, making sure I've repositioned the balloons. I had to flip them because they were facing the wrong way. And then just wanted to make the wings a little bit bigger. Even bigger, so to say. Fixing a little bit the shape of the wings. Because I wanted more lift, and I mean, we have an unholy amount of lift, but I want this guy to be a glider, because I need stability at subsonic speeds, and I believe this one has it, but it doesn't hurt to add a little bit more. Like I said, I like to over-engineer my space planes. And I think that one will lead us to almost like a lost design, so to say. Okay, just enlarging the control surfaces and maybe aligning them even so they look kind of nice. Matching the taper ratios and all that jazz. Fixing once again winglets, because all of these changes required me to, basically go from the get-go. So have these two aligned. And I'm trying even to match the textures, which would definitely be a step forward. Okay, making sure that I balance out the forward winglets, and also I figured I actually like this better, these tail fins, because these tail fins can actually do the braking. They just open up like an air brake, and that's, or act as a spoiler, which I think it's actually quite good. And it gives the aircraft this nice sleek profile, which I like a lot. Then I tried to find the RCS thrusters, which I had on the previous version, because basically I made a couple of versions of this craft and I had to go back and forth while I was figuring out what works and what doesn't. And these space-wide thruster blocks seem to be doing the job pretty well. Bigger amount of air brakes. Making sure that I put everything on action groups. I want to be able to be stopping quickly because, Laythe surface is uneven. Okay, adding some control authority, and that brings us to, I believe this is almost like a final tests series. Oh yeah, I also added the 2 engines at the back, but that was actually even bigger of a problem than a solution because I didn't connect the fuel pump. So basically these 2 engines, I was thinking to have them as drop engines. So there were some tiny amount of corrections that I needed to fix, but then I realized, holy crap, they're not doing shit. So I decided to ditch them and put the carborundum drives here instead. It was an idea that I was toying with to have, like, 2-stage drives, but no, not really. And once again, I'm sorry guys that I keep repeating myself, but the previous attempt to take us up was unsuccessful. So I had to retest once again. And as you can see, this craft has one huge wing, which makes it a rather big glider, and that's kind of my point that I wanted to make sure that I'm using. So let's see if we can activate the reactor. I'm basically starting up the reactor and I'm starting up the radiators, because at the point when I actually start to engage the drives for the carborundum, I want to be already at full speed. So our star waster starts to kick in and we start to pick up some speed. And as we are picking up speed, our thrust to weight starts dropping, so I start actually the carborundum drives a little bit early this time. But it doesn't matter in the end, so we have plenty of delta V with the whole craft, so we don't need to care. And my engines gave out at 984 meters per second, which is the record low. And get that my time to apoapsis is at 40-ish, and I have a pretty huge amounts to burn, but I'm actually higher up in the atmosphere with good ascent trajectory, so I'm actually willing to give this one a go. I was already thinking of abandoning it and trying again, but I'm willing to give it a go, because if this one succeeds, that means a little bit tweaked, better ascent profile will work even better. And as you can see, the craft is stable. Our apoapsis is dangerously decreasing, and I'm pitching slightly downwards to hopefully gain more velocity as we head up. Then I pitch at 45 degrees to... I'm trying to balance out here the time to apoapsis the higher we get, but we'll see if I am lucky enough. 13, 12, 11 and 10, and I'm starting to worry that I won't be able to make it. 9.7, 9.6, but we are already going fast enough, so I think it will be a tight fit. And yes, our time to apoapsis is starting to rise. Yes, so we just might be going to the orbit today. I'll obviously make some tweaks and changes in terms of the ascent profile and all that stuff, but it seems like we have a business case here. (1900 meters per second). In this case, as you can see, I'm relying way more on my carborundum drives as compared to previous attempts. And I believe we are going to space, ladies and gentlemen, because our apoapsis will be and there we go, apoapsis is above the atmosphere. Around 100. Oh, a couple of glory shots. This is beautiful. Okay, and at the apoapsis circularization burn, I'm guessing not too big. Roughly in the 90-ish or 70-ish ballpark. And this craft actually controls much better than the previous one, because it's rather a glider rather than a dart. I mean, not that it matters a lot, because we have also put a couple of SAS units. As you can hear by the music, this is heavily accelerated. Coming up on the circularization burn. Which is supposed to happen in 1 minute roughly. And there we go. Perfect. I would say this is rather a successful experiment. Final tests. Let's open up the cabin and just see that basically we can, still freeze Kerbals. I'll take one rather than all of them. Screenshot. Hello. Just please board the popsicle capsule. Thank you. And freeze. Well, build frozen. I say that would be a business case. Okay. Wonderful. Now, there is one final test that needs to be performed. So let's take these two guys away. Some small amount of corrections in terms of fuel and all that jazz. Make sure that we support for other things, yes. Alright, and then we come back to the re-entry to Laythe test. And this time I'm basically, once again putting these guys on the wrong side, so I need to flip the balloons, but at least it seems like we have them deployed in the right way. Good enough. We are coming up and decelerating much quicker than we'd had before, which is definitely a good thing, and I feel like I have way more control over my plane than I did before. Great. So the moment we stop burning, I will be ditching the balloons. $1,300 balloons ditched, and we are coming up on land, and I'm hoping that I will be able to fly up there. I'm making sure that I do decelerate first, and then I will be hopefully coming low enough and be able to fly this like a glider almost. Note that in my defense, well, when playing this, I've been playing at 4 frames per second, so it's a little bit harder to control the crowd, but I mean, it still controls rather well compared to the other ones, so the previous ones didn't put out much more FPS than this one, so yeah. Okay, hitting the air brakes to decelerate. We're still going around Mach 3. What it ultimately does, it puts our vertical speed at an increase, but if I manage to maintain a pitch up angle, then it's all fine and dandy. So I do want the vertical speed to be slightly negative because we do want to be descending, and I have actually hit hard on the air brakes because I want to be going subsonic rather. By the way, guys, I think we are coming up on the end of the episode. Please do like if you will like the episode, hit subscribe and turn on that notification thing. It helps me out a great deal, or you will be notified when I post new content. Also, feel free to give me feedback on the episode if you like it, if what you feel was good, what you feel was off or boring or whatever, and what I could do to improve the further episodes clearly. So after this test is done, I will be wishing you thank you all for watching and basically sign off. But let's see if we are able to, decently enough fly and land. I mean, I have chosen the worst place possible to land, but all in all, I'm rather optimistic when it comes to my craft performance and handling. So I am stable at subsonic speeds. Okay, my engines ran out of intake air for some reason. So I'm trying to pull up a little bit to go over this hill rather than not. I'm trying to find a good valley to land, but it's almost impossible at this terrain. So I'm hoping that the SSTOs that I will be sending to Laythe, or that are already sent en route to Laythe, will be able to find me a decent chunk of land to land, and then I will be shooting for that piece of land, hopefully. And we are coming up slightly at the too steep of an angle, but I'm trying to maintain my vertical speed up and bump. I've hit the landing gear and the landing chutes at the worst time possible, but it happens. So, well, I consider this a success. Thanks and bye.